Good morning, everyone. Before we start our proceedings, may I ask our religious leaders to offer some prayers. Imam C, you have the floor.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تستفتحوا فقد جاءكم الفتح نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل والله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسوسة الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, Imam C. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Lord God Almighty, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Nissi, Jehovah Bana, we call upon you this morning hour as we are in the TRRC sitting. We ask for your Holy Spirit's guidance and direction as we meet. We continue to pray that these meetings will all go well for the common good of all who live in this nation, the Gambia, and of your children that are abroad, living in other nations as well. We pray that truth, forgiveness, and reconciliation and reparation will become a positive thing in this land, so that all will return to normal and things will begin to work positively for the common good of all. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop, for that. Council, are we ready with this morning's witness?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning to you all. We are ready to proceed, so I ask that the usher kindly bring the witness in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff CEESAY,
I, Sheriff CEESAY,
do swear that
do swear that
I will speak the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me Allah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. CEESAY. Welcome to the Commission.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, let me say thank you very much for making yourself available on such short notice. As you already know, we have met before. My name is Horeja Balagay, and I will be asking you questions today on behalf of the commissioners. Your testimony today will be mainly in relation to the 1996 Denton Bridge incident. We will also address another incident in relation to 1997, all of which involve members of the UDP who were allegedly victimized. Just a matter for you to know, as your testimony is going on, there is interpretation into the local languages. Therefore, we will have to allow a few seconds in between our speeches to ensure that there is no overlap speaking, no overlap speeches. Do you understand that, sir?
I do.
Thank you very much. Before we go into the two issues that I mentioned, I will begin by asking you a few questions about your biographical information as well as your professional background. And then after, we will go into the two issues that I've just addressed. So first of all, in order that it is clear who you are, can you kindly state your full name for the record?
Sheriff Alhaji Lamin CEESAY.
And what is your date of birth, Dr. CEESAY?
16/3/1942.
Currently, what is your profession?
Medical practitioner.
Can you briefly tell us about your educational background, just so that the commissioners have an idea of who you are and your background?
Armitage Primary, then Armitage Secondary School.
Please continue.
Then the Methodist Boys High School in Pathos then. The Bow Government School in Sierra Leone for the sixth form. University of London, 1961. And Guy's Hospital Medical School. Professional qualifications, the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh first in 1970, and Royal College of Surgeons of England in 1971.
And after completing your education and obtaining those qualifications, you began your career, is that correct, in the medical field?
That is correct.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
I was employed as medical officer special grade by the Gambia government in 1972. I was promoted to the level of consultant surgeon 2 years later, that's 1974. I resigned the position of consultant surgeon in 1976. I've been in private practice since then.
And as part of your private practice, where did you set up your facility?
at the beginning used consulting offices, but clinical practice at Westfield Clinic. 1987, I was hospital director for Farafenni District Hospital in North Bank. A year later, about 1989, I was clinic director at the Kuruli Clinic, and I'm still there.
So in 1996, your medical practice would have still been at Kololi, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us what kind of medical practice it was? What kind of facilities did you offer?
Trained and qualified in the traditional fields of general surgery and trauma. But then along with that, and over the years, you acquire a lot of experience in all sectors of general medicine, pediatrics, and so on. But my main line was general surgery and traumatology.
So when patients came to your clinic, it was a clinic, is that correct?
Absolutely.
So when patients came to your clinic, they would undergo a registration process, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us a bit about the registration procedure at your clinic?
For the general purpose, we want computerized, so we use a system which was simple. All Gambians have a registration number beginning with G. If they are male, it's GM. If they are females, they are GF. All non-Gambians are registered XM if they are male, or XF if they are females. So that, and then across that is the year of registration. So you have XM and the year, and then the index numeric, starting from the first patient we saw at the beginning of every year. So that's the combination of registration fees. So straight away, it indicates which year the patient was seen, whether it's male or female, and Gambian or non-Gambian.
So in 1996, you would have kept similar records containing the dates you saw patients, the gender, that sort of statistical information, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
This would also include some kind of report about their medical condition, is that correct?
Depending on the clinical situation and so on.
Therefore, bearing in mind the very important and sensitive issue of doctor-patient confidentiality, your testimony here before the Commission is expected to touch upon just generally scopes of victimization without divulging specific identifying information. So in that sense, we would expect you to assist the Commission by, for example, referring to an individual suffered X type of injuries, or there were generally cases of X and Y, so without giving specific identifying information. Do you understand that?
I do.
So I would like to move on to the issue of the first main topic, which is about the 1996 Denton Bridge incident. Do you recall an incident that allegedly occurred at the Denton Bridge in 1996?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall the date of that incident?
22nd of September.
You were not present at Denton Bridge during that particular incident. Is that correct?
I was in the party approaching Denton Bridge when the incident broke.
But you did not witness what happened at Denton Bridge?
I did not physically stand at the site of the obstruction or the incident itself.
So how did you come to find out what happened at the bridge, even though you weren't there when those events unfolded?
The security detail for the passengers in our car, I call the executive car, came and reported that there was a major incident there, and it was recommended that we return to Banjul or Combo and abort the trip because there was a lot of problem at the bridge. I did not physically stand at the site of what was actually happening because there was such a commotion, so many cars. There was the security difficulty had arisen so abruptly that the chief of security suggested to Mr. Davo that it would be better, more prudent to abort his trip.
So to be clear, you were in a vehicle with Mr. Dabo at the time. Are you referring to Mr. Usainu Dabo?
I am.
So you were approaching Denton Bridge on that day when you were given the advice that you should turn around because of an incident at Denton Bridge. Is that correct?
This is correct.
So what happened next after you turned around? Where did you go next?
Apart from the security detail, the other occupants of the car was Mr. Dabo himself and Dr. Boro Suso and myself. So the driver turned around. We had escorts before and after our vehicle, and we drove back to Pipeline Road, the residence of Mr. Dabo. This must be between 10 and 11, but I couldn't be absolutely sure about that. But we left the major party of the convoy at the bridge.
And did you eventually see some of the members of the convoy who ended up going to Denton Bridge itself? Did you
Yes.
subsequently see them?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
By 10 o'clock the following day, a number of ill and injured individuals presented at the clinic. I had no prior knowledge of it, but then in the spirit of the ways we work and the principles that the clinic stood for, I gave instructions that anybody who comes to the clinic should be identified. You get the correct name, you get the address, and you get the age. And that makes them registered as patients of the clinic. On no account should any individual be refused entry. In other words, open the gates of the clinic to whoever gets in there. By the end of the day, we'd seen something like 115. In 3-4 days time, we saw a total of 119 individuals. The average age of individuals was about 27, a very youngish group.
If I may just interject there, the patients that you saw, the 115 that you saw on the first day, meaning the 23rd of September, 1996, And then the other patients that you saw in the subsequent days, making it a total of 119, were they all victims of the Denton Bridge incident on the 22nd September?
All of them.
You began by telling us the ages of the victims. You said the average age was 27 years old. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us how old the youngest victim was?
2 girls were 16 years. I think they come from Kalindi. The youngest age we saw was 16. The oldest was a man from Kiang. He was 60 years old, a very energetic, enthusiastic individual.
So these 119 victims had children as well as elderly people. Is that correct?
I would assume that.
What about the gender of the 119 victims? Can you tell us, for example, how many were female?
16 were female, the rest were men. And of those 16, 2 were subsequently grouped in the seriously injured group and required admission.
If we can focus on the 2 females who were seriously injured, what do you mean by seriously injured? What types of injuries did they sustain?
First, the vast majority of the victims had superficial injuries, mainly on their backs and their limbs, upper limbs, like either defensive injuries and maybe like 50% of those was in that category.
And what do you mean by defensive injuries?
Somebody trying to defend himself or herself. Usually there will be injuries in the arm, the extensor part of the arm and so on.
So you could tell based on where the injury was located on their body. Is that what you're saying?
Normally if you find somebody with injuries on their back, that's not the defensive. It means that it always say permissive. It allows the individual or the assailant or the whatever to inflict what harm he can do to the individual's back.
You also mentioned superficial injuries. What do you mean by that? What type of injuries are you referring to?
This would be skin cuts, skin abrasions or bruises, not straightforward deep cuts. And they are usually sustained by whips or sticks rather than by equipments like guns or sharp stuff like knives or things like that. There were no sharp injuries, there were superficial injuries.
So the type of injuries that you saw allowed you to conclude what could have caused it. And you've mentioned things like whips and sticks. Is that correct?
Injuries on the back would suggest that the guy who was being beaten exposed his back and laid on a surface with the assailant standing over him and just whipping him. Injuries on the arm would suggest that at least the individual was trying to protect himself, or in fact, fight back. Now, the majority of injuries we saw on the 23rd was a mixture of this. The men always had injuries at the back of the shoulder girdle and the upper part of the trunk. The females had injuries on their bottom. It was selectively to hit men at the top, indicating that possibly they just took their shirts off or they tore their shirts off. And the ones with the bottom, for some strange reason, didn't have any injuries at the back. But the important thing is, these injuries were severe enough to cause skin bruising, and some of them in fact were bleeding. We had 2 or 3 who had secondary sepsis. So by the time they came to the clinic, they were discharging not just blood and serum, but also pus. Some of it stuck to their shirts or things like that. So it's a combination of this. We didn't see any broken limbs. We didn't see any head injuries. And during the course of the admission there, 3 required X-rays because of suspected lung injuries. But the majority about 55–75% of them really had superficial, that same category, rather than deep-seated or penetrating injuries or things like that.
And the superficial being the cuts, the abrasions, and the wounds that you've mentioned to us.
Yes.
I want to focus on a few things that you told us and just get additional information from you. You mentioned what you observed as a medical practitioner based on the wounds that you saw, and you were able to draw some conclusions as to what caused it and how that could have happened. Did the victims also tell you about what happened to them at Denton Bridge?
Physically, not much, but the sort of the history behind how they were forced off the vehicle, how they were arranged, and my impression was they were threatened into lying prone, lying with the face down on the ground, with these soldiers parading between them, beating them one by one, because you could count. You could count the number of scars on their back. Subsequently, there was a uniform number of 4. Everybody had 4 strips on the back. One individual had 10, but you could count them. So it suggests some form of cooperation or coercion. Somebody threatens you, lie down, they stand and leisurely just beat you until you, a lot of them came with that, with torn shirts also. The individuals with defensive injuries, that's with the arms and so were not much. There were a few who had injuries to the thigh. These were, like I say, thigh and buttock. Casualties had that difficulty, pain.
So what I understand from your testimony is that you observed their injuries and you drew some conclusions about what happened. The victims also provided you with some information about what happened, but your observations and their observations basically corroborated each other, like they were consistent. Your own observations and what the victims told you. Is that what you're saying?
Except the point where there's an element of almost cooperation with the assailant. Because if you are aggressive and the individual has to defend herself or himself, it would not be in the best interest of the individual to lie on the floor and let the assailant do what he wants to do. I had a distinct impression that most of the injuries were caused on the back being beaten. Occasionally the whip, I can't confirm, but certainly whatever they used slipped, and they had some injuries in the armpits and the thighs. So this could be due to absolute horrified by the threat of the ultimate weapon, which was brandished openly to them. That's a weapon. I wasn't there, but and occasionally we had guns or tools. So they were terrified, and in such a situation, I think the sort of duress, the stress, and everything would make them submit the same way that a bad example would be the youth submitted. Chairman Paratrum says, sit, and he sits. 10 of them can sit because they are traumatized physiologically, psychologically, to the point where they feel so helpless that under command, they would seem to be cooperating with it. This was the impression I had. Nonetheless, it doesn't take care of the fact that this was a wicked, unprovoked assault on defenseless men and women with weapons, whatever, even a stick would constitute a weapon in my view. So they were assaulted, they were beaten with marks which lasted for several weeks under situations of stress. So that's the summary of it.
Mm. And essentially, it appears as though you're saying what you observed from the injuries and what they told you about what happened was consistent.
Absolutely.
And the information they provided you was the following day after the incident.
Yes.
And based on what you've described, a lot of the injuries, you started to talk about 2 females who were severely injured and were later on referred because of this, the seriousness of their injuries. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, dealing with 115 young people within 24-hour period, we had to adopt a practical approach to this. The clinic at most can accommodate 15 individuals as a limit to our capacity in terms of nursing and equipment and so on. So the formula we adopted was we tried to identify the ones who are most seriously affected by this, irrespective of, gender or something. And on that basis, we identified 12 who required inpatient attention for drips, first aid care, wound toilets, antibiotics, tetanus cover, and analgesics. 15 of those people would fit for that. In fact, we admitted 15 of those. Of those 15, 2 were the females I spoke about. The rest could be treated as an outpatient basis. The others were given appointments for further investigations like chest X-ray in a situation of 2 or 3 people and so on. So if I say 2 were admitted, it has to be taken in that context. That's 2 of the worst ones. The worst, I'm talking about the worst of the worst. And also geographical location of the individuals, because we had clients or patients from all the 5 major divisions of the country, although most of them were in the greater Banjul area. So that I can only give a rough idea that the reason we admitted this girl 20 years ago was because she in the category of those who are seriously injured. Injury is medically, there's the physical component of it, and of course the psychological fear component of it. You're not dealing with somebody who's injured in the kitchen. You're talking about somebody brandishing a gun, lying on the floor in the bush and hitting you, and you had to pick up your rags and walk 7 kilometers. A lot of them didn't have vehicles to Kololi. So within that context, I cannot specifically say what. I know that in my heart of hearts, they must be seriously injured to warrant an admission. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, in fact, that's very, very helpful.
Okay.
Essentially, 115 of the 119 patients were injured, and you had to triage to determine those who were the most severely injured from that group because you had limited capacity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And based on that, you admitted some patients, including 2 females that you've talked about. You also told us, you began to tell us a bit about the psychological state of the victims. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What was their condition psychologically from what you observed?
In all fairness, I was impressed by the level of strength of these individuals. There was nobody crying. Women cried, not these ones. They are hard, they are brave, and they got substance. Nobody was querying anybody, nobody was blaming anybody. Everyone sat by themselves thinking, and you know, behind that is a resolve that they did not do anything wrong. In the light of that, it helps easy management to look at 150, and I undertook to see every individual, not let my assistant or a nurse do it. So I'd have the proper insight into really what, not only they were suffering physically, but the impact psychologically and so on at that period and beyond. So a lot of credit must be given to those. People are injured within 5 kilometers of the main teaching hospital in Banjo, with its capacity to do that and much more. Nursing capacity unlimited. Much easier to walk from Denton Bridge to RPH. Not one of those guys came. So I think that's a credit, not just to the morale, but the sort of post-traumatic difficulty or whatever they might have encountered. Most of those patients I saw for the very first time, and I never saw them again. In other words, at home or wherever they went, they fought hard to make themselves strong. And if you know that by the following mass media or something, people you saw in suffering, in pain and so on, came out as if nothing ever happened to them before. So the psychological assessment of it is a bit complicated because you're not dealing with a normal. They are not abnormal. I think they are superhuman. All those we saw is a credit to them. And the battle they were engaged in.
So you were impressed by their resolve because of what they displayed and the fact that many of them didn't come back after you treated them the first time?
Yes.
I want to focus a bit more on the types of injuries. Were there any particular injuries or any particular cases that stood out for you?
The boy, 35 years old, no white-collar job. That means no university, no director, nothing like that. Black-collar job, technical job, respectable, painter, plumber, whatever. Married, 2 children. Disillusionment, political attraction, a born community leader. Finds himself in the UDP. It seems natural. After the incident, he could not say what was the matter with him. Just showed me his scars. And I made a note, scars so and so, so and so. But he didn't say the complete story. 3 days later he came. Even there, it was from his body language and so on that I thought he required further attention. And he had been, or allegedly, kidnapped by 4 men. His actual story was 4 NIA, but I'm just saying 4 men. 3 of them pinned him down against a wall. The 4th one came, tore his trousers off, exposed his penis, and put a lighter flame on his glans. The glans is the tip of the penis, the fleshy part, not the skin part. He said, "Doctor, I have never experienced any pain like that in my entire life." And they left him collapsed. And he was left to decide what to do about that. Like most people from Nyani, they would be embarrassed. Embarrassed is probably the wrong word. To tell his wife, to tell his sons, to tell his friends, even to tell his colleagues, even to tell me when he came there. Because he told me this 6 days after the incident. And I showed, he showed me. Where the urine comes out is called the meatus. It's like a small opening. That's why the urine comes out. That's what sperm comes out. And that is the source of the ability to have an erectile penis to be able to perform sexual intercourse. In other words, to put a big dent in his manhood, his leadership in the African Gambian context and the Nyani context. It would be as if you emasculated him. These are the untold stories. What was the question again? Now, that's one instance that.
And just to clarify, Dr. CEESAY, was that incident as a result of the 1996 Denton Bridge incident or another incident?
A lot of these have had multiple arrests. There's no one individual is here. A lot of those are people who are arrested, or not arrested, but who presented at the clinic. But I don't know of any particular party militant in the UDP, who was not present at Denton Bridge. Some were listed, some just did not come in there, but he was registered on this was on the 23rd of September. That was the first meeting. Then subsequently people dripped in, and on the 17th of June 1997, this was almost a year after that, some of those kept repeated. Like I say, his injury was on the 9th of June 1997. But he reported to me on the 19th that he must have been keeping this within his house and so on for 4 or 5 days, because he was embarrassed to tell anybody, to show anybody. Because he's a brave soldier. So, and we do it on a serial, you come today, we write the date, because we don't have a computer system where you come automatically, you get slotted out to your file or whatever it is. A lot of these individuals you saw, all the 5 who came together had been seen subsequently or previously. Some I've seen 6 times. He in particular I saw 4 times, and he told me this on the 4th visit.
So if I may just say what I understand from your testimony, this 35-year-old gentleman was part of the Denton Bridge incident in '96. He was one of the victims, but this issue of what was meted out to him in his sexual organ happened in June of 1997. 97
years.
And this was by NIA, allegedly members of the NIA, National Intelligence Agency. Is that correct?
I think it would be a mistake to put things together on the sort of Denton Bridge, because there are lots of things leading up to that, and there are lots of things which in fact accelerated after that. We don't have a 1996 file. We have a patient file. And this consistent assault on them was there before the bridge and continued after the bridge, especially facing up to the Brikama Congress. So an individual who's been traumatized will have the same file. It will be a problem for me to say what preceded what, but we do know, for example, that this delivery was in September 22nd. And this other incident I'm talking about, the penalty, was in 1997, in June. But it's on the same individual, and it's the same thing that builds up the character of the individual and the level of the atrocities.
And it's very helpful that we have some records from you, because it allows us to determine which incident happened when, even if it relates to the same individual, because you would have recorded the date. So we have that record, and that's clear. So this gentleman suffered some harm during the Denton Bridge incident in '96, and similarly suffered other harm in 1997. So that's very clear. I wanted to ask you about something you mentioned in your statement, still focusing on the 1996 Denton Bridge incident. You mentioned a woman who was pregnant at the time, who sustained injuries as a result of that incident. Can you tell us a bit about her?
I got scared when somebody told me that this particular woman was pregnant, and she didn't have any specific injuries, I could tell. We were just being precautionary, because she walked from the site. I think she lived in Pacao, and had to walk all the way back. So, but there was no indication of injury. She came to the clinic to check, and we checked and found that, in fact, she had no physical injuries or anything that would alarm or damage or compromise the pregnancy. I mentioned it just to indicate the scope of the trauma, which you had no respect of state of pregnancy or the age of the individual or any disability, with the individual. Because we had people who were not very well, who had been subjected to a tour lasting 2 weeks with a lot of physical and challenges they had to meet in a very difficult, almost vicious political campaign. So on top of that, you arrive for a penultimate meeting or the last program. Some people maybe would not have had lunch that day, people would not have had dinner that day, thirsty, and then you're subjected to this, and you had to walk all your way back to wherever you in Serekonda, Bakau, and things like that. So if you've noticed that somebody's been pregnant 5 months, a very vulnerable period in her pregnancy, it was out of concern that I listed her as one of those we saw, and we did see her, but happily there was no complications to pregnancy.
And you mentioned that some of the victims, you had to refer them elsewhere.
Yes. This was, normally, I said, they would beat them on their backs, because it's easy to conceal it. You put a gown on it, you wouldn't know. No facial injuries, no frost injuries. Maybe there are sort of defensive injuries in the back and the front. But the majority of the trauma was inflicted in the back. Now, he had one in the lower part of his chest. It wasn't a flat bar whip, like a poncho. He had difficulty in breathing. All the criteria which suggest internal chest injury. At worst, you got to do an X-ray. Make sure you ain't got a pneumothorax, that air going in the lung. Because that's. They presented at 7 o'clock in the evening, I was actually called in an emergency, the three of those. He was one of those. They did not want to be admitted, actually said it. Because maybe they were arrested. The story was they were arrested in Brikama, taken elsewhere. They said NIA, subjected to this thing, released. Before they went, I surmise, before they returned to Brikama, they came to the they came to the clinic, and they were anxious to go back, you know, as anybody would. And what I said, what I noted was that requires to come and have a chest X-ray. But I did not see him again, this particular individual. Now, the other guy, he had a big hematoma. A hematoma is a bruise underneath the skin containing blood. That happens when you have a soft tissue injury beneath the skin. It bleeds and the blood collects there. Blood pushes pressure on the nerves and the bones and the joints. He wasn't able to walk or sit or things like that. He also had to have X-ray of the lumbar spine. I'm just giving you this because it indicates that my records will show that he was to do that, but I had no sort of jurisdiction to go beyond the treatment I can give at 9 o'clock in the night, or to advise the individual to follow it up. But none of those who I recommended chest X-rays or lumbar spine X-rays came back.
If I may just interject there, Dr. CEESAY. So this group was also from the 1997 NIA incident. And we will come to that, but I just wanted to ask you two more questions about 1996, and then we will take all the information you have about 1997. As part of the 119 victims that you saw at your clinic, did any of them succumb to their injuries?
Luckily, nobody. Nobody, we lost no one.
And this is at the clinic itself, right?
Yes. We said nobody died at the clinic. There was, can I go? Yes. Okay.
Yes, please.
There was a 59-year-old man. Although admittedly he had previous history or concurrent history of tobacco-related bronchitis, he was beaten very viciously because everyone knew by implication or by whatever that he was the musician extraordinary for the UDP. Before that, any other but that everybody identified him as such and so on. So he stood out. He was singled out from those who were occupants of the, I'm not sure which of the two main trucks. And from what I heard, they concentrated on his fingers because that's the tummy pain. Coincidentally, he also had chest injuries. When he came, in fact, we put him on a drip straight away. Resuscitation, antibiotics, and luckily, he improved the breathing and so on and so on. He was there 3 or 4 days until he felt better. And one of the things with this is, after the incident, every time somebody misses a relative, they wonder if he's dead. Because the regime doesn't really try and alleviate fears or respond to the fears and the rights of ordinary members of society. So you had to go from one hospital to the other, find out from neighbors and sometimes from prisoners whether your relative is alive or whatever. In that instance, so they verified that he was under pressure to go home. This was the thing. He went home with medication, And we learned, I think a week or two later, that he died at home.
So do you, yes, please. Do you believe that this musician died as a result of the injuries?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I won't ask you for names, of course, so please continue and tell us what you wanted to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that some of the provisions in the ethics of doctor-patient relationships but he died at the hands of the security.
Thank you very much for providing that information, Dr. CEESAY. That's very helpful to understand what really happened during that incident and the consequences thereafter. Apart from the 119 victims that you treated from that incident, did you treat any other individual apart from those UDP supporters?
I did not see, no one was identified. We did not register, and we therefore did not treat any person following that incident who was not a UDP supporter. In other words, they were part of the combatants, the security forces. We did not see or treat anyone at the clinic with injuries related to that incident.
So in fact, all of the victims that you treated were UDP supporters or members? Thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, probably during a private session, I will provide additional information that we would like to tender as exhibits in relation to Dr. CEESAY's testimony, but it's confidential information that we do not want to address during this public session. With your leave, I will do that at another time. Thank you. So Dr. CEESAY, you've provided us with a lot of information about what happened in 1996. You began by telling us that some of the victims of 1996 also suffered additional harm. And you mentioned the case of a 35-year-old who was allegedly detained by members of the National Intelligence Agency, and then suffered essentially sexual torture. You also mentioned another, an older person who suffered injuries and had to undergo a chest X-ray. And these, I believe, are in relation to the 1997 incident. So can you tell us what you know about the 1997 incident?
Curiously enough, a lot of those who report do so at night. It's just, they come at night. I don't know what the reason of this would be, whether they were scared to present at a clinic, a non-government clinic, or what. And that makes the management much more complicated for me, because if you need laboratory facilities, you need an X-ray, you need, in fact, additional nursing support. You do not, it's not, so it's much easier during the day and night than at night. A lot of those following the 1996 one would come in the evening, sometimes in groups of 3, 4, or 5, like the other one, 5 of them. I don't know who. Somebody asked me this, I'm the investigator. Who brought them? I do not know, because usually you find them at the clinic. And since our sort of rule of combat is whoever comes, there's an open door. All you need is you must identify the individual. And whoever comes, I must see. Don't say go or come. I must see. You mean what the prerogative is to provide as much help as possible and at the appropriate time and have it recorded. This was what we were following up to now. So even after 1996, we had event on through the elections, remember, and then after the elections and so on, up to when the Gambia decided.
Do you recall the date of the 1997 incident?
That's in June, 13th of June.
Can you tell us, as far as you know, what happened on the 13th of June, 1997?
They came in 2 days after the alleged torture. In other words, they were tortured on the 11th. And you go further in the records, you find that, in fact, this particular individual with the penal, he was arrested on the 9th, and he was tortured on the 11th, and he came to the clinic on the 13th, within the same week. In other words, maybe, I said to myself, if he was tortured with so much pain, why did he wait 24, 48 hours? By that time, of course, the evidence was there. I mean, if you burn a flesh, it takes maybe 6 weeks more before this guy disappears. So, to answer your question, it was the 13th of June 1997 when those 5 individuals came. But one of them had had this penal thing with him 3-4 days earlier and never reported it.
And when these 5 individuals, and from what I can see in the list that you provided us, you refer to 6 individuals.
Yeah.
When these individuals came to your clinic, did they tell you who had tortured them?
All the usual, what they call it, the usual suspects. They say NIA, because they never identify names, so I just say alleged. Because the story is always that the torture is not done at the victim's house or in the public street or the market. They do it under detention when there are no witnesses. Naturally, the guy will say, well, 4 men or 2 women, 4. Do you know why you were taken? Sometimes they do, but sometimes you don't. And all I indicate in my records, card records, the time they arrive, I indicate that, and the allegation, and the date, because those are important. Those ones, they say they were arrested on the 9th. They were taken to NIA the 11th. 9th, NIA, 11th was the torture, and the 13th was when he came to the clinic. And when he was coming, this particular guy, when he was coming, he came with the other guy with the back who couldn't walk, and the one with the suspected puncture, long hair. That is that. The other one were 2 with serious wounds on the back. And they all came in one car, as far as I remember. I don't know who dropped them. It didn't matter. The clinic wasn't going to tolerate identifying what. We just look at the individual and see and try to do it at no cost to the individual.
And before I interrupted you earlier in your testimony, you started to tell us that one of them suffered from hematoma. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell us more about that?
Because that individual, when you talk to him like that, you won't know. Ask him to sleep and lie down. You will be horrified. From the shoulder blades down, there were 10, we counted 10 large strips of scars, each at least 10 inches and about 2 or 3. In other words, you either use a flat bar or nothing sharp, but the injury was concentrated in the lower back, the lower spine. And 2 or 3 days after, that formed a big swelling, a subcutaneous was. In other words, the skin may look okay, but beneath it is the hematoma, the blood clot. He found it impossible to sit. He couldn't stand, let alone walk. Quite apart from that, he had other deep wounds on the thigh, inner part of the thigh. So,
sorry, what do you think caused those so-called dimples in the inner thigh? Could you ascertain what the cause was?
I can't imagine. I don't think there is a necessity for them to use multiple weapons, because they wanted something which will not kill the individual. They wanted something which might not attract attention or less from a close examination. In other words, hurt them where people can't see. And then it becomes their responsibility to prove that they have been assaulted. So the favorite position I found was back injuries. And they're flat. Maybe they don't know that you can do a lot of harm inside the body by an injury which is even not penetrating. It doesn't have to be penetrating. Contusions, nerve injuries, ligament injuries, even organ rupture can happen just with a flat injury. You don't have to have a knife for that. So consequently, the sacroiliac point, where you sit on, actually where you stand on, it takes you weight. That got edematous because of the trauma, because the hematoma pressing on it. Subsequently, he wasn't able to walk. So he was using crutches by March 2000. The fact that got steadily worse, it got worse for a while and then improved. Because the interesting thing about nerve is nerves can undergo swelling, edema and so on, which can resolve over a period. You can also have neuropraxia, where the injury itself can cause a shock. And you have sciatica. Sciatica means pain going down the leg and numbness, not from a nerve cut. Nerve cut is the final degree where neurotmesis, where the nerve is cut. If it's cut, it can't repair. It's like the heart muscle or something. You also have asomesis, neuromesis. So my theory is, in December, he had the injury, 1997, going to, because I saw him on several occasions, up to 2000, I think it was March, then he had to go on crutches. And then over the period, the swelling subsided. He was on continuous ED, I know, because I gave him ED from work and so on. And he got slightly improved. It is possible that the pressure on the nerve relaxes. And he had a neuropraxia is nerve shock, or even had azotemia, which is the fatty layer gets disrupted, but the nerve tissue itself is intact. And that provides a opportunity for the nerve to regenerate, not the nerve cell itself, but the nerve covering. This is why he improved slightly during the last few, because I last saw him, I think, in June of 2006, although he came on and off and so on. That would explain the cycle events. Getting bad, unable to walk, and then stabilization, and then steadily getting better. Subsequently, of course, other things took their toll, and I don't know if the individual is available right now.
And all these were as a result of the injuries inflicted upon allegedly by the NIA?
Those ones I indicated, I'm absolutely sure they were.
And because you were able to observe this individual over a number of years,
yes,
you saw how it affected his condition over time.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
These are very serious injuries that you've described as a result of torture allegedly inflicted by the National Intelligence Agency. Where you've mentioned about 6 individuals, well, the list contains 6. Are there any other injuries that you noticed over time as a result of what happened to these 6 individuals?
Well, I and my staff have been digging through our files, but these are the ones we actually can testify and say we saw, because there's evidence of it in our attendance register, in our card system, and these are the ones that we have been able to highlight. Like I say, the majority may be just long suffering, patient people enduring their pain for expediency, because of embarrassment, because Gambians are very reticent. Men probably more chauvinistic than Italians, I don't know. But to the best of my knowledge, these ones I indicated to you are the ones I am so.
And the individuals you've talked about, the patients from 1997, were they all men?
Yes. Yes.
And from what you've said, they suffered severe injuries, and these are the individuals that you could identify.
Yes.
But I understand from what you've said that you believe that there are many more cases, but these are the ones you were able to dig out and talk about here today. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, as a medical practitioner and from a medical standpoint, is there something you'd like to say, Dr. CEESAY?
I don't know. It's too big. I mean, there's an overlay of, the popular word. Can I wanted to talk to the escort. The one who
Just a second. I'll have someone come up to you.
All right, we do that.
Just a second. Can we? Yeah. The mic.
Well, interplay here, the medical part is small, is the underlying political situation which really is the cause of the thing.
Dr. CEESAY, if I may interrupt, I understand that you would like to have a break, so if I can just ask Mr. Chairman if we can take a break and allow the witness to come back after the break and continue the testimony.
Thank you very much, Counsel, for that. Do we do the 30-minute break now, or would you want us to continue when he comes back and then take the break, or what? I'm in your hands now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that we allow the witness about 10 minutes and then we continue, because I'm at the end of my questioning, and so I can allow the commissioners to ask a few questions, perhaps allow him to make a final statement, and then we're finished with this witness. So a break of 10 minutes perhaps would be ideal.
Splendid. That's okay with me. Thank you.